the leader of the free world, folding in Finland to the will of Vladimir Putin. Americans still reeling in disbelief ask, what kind of president denies overwhelming evidence to side with Russia over his own? With elections looming, Republicans scramble to limit the damage, as once trusted Trump fixer Michael Cohen appears willing to add to Trump's troubles by telling all. Here at home, the bloodshed at Parkland and Santa Fe have schools pushing back hard. But will the exploding number of zero-tolerance prosecutions really make campuses safer? And at Houston City Hall, a former press secretary criminally indicted for withholding thousands of embarrassing emails. Will the scandal end with Darian Ward, or could others in the Turner administration face fresh scrutiny? I'm Greg Groogan, and welcome to Watch Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, Republican strategist Jessica Colon. Next up, progressive commentator and attorney Nyanza Moore. In the 3 spot, former state representative Republican Steve Toth. Batting cleanup, longtime super neighborhood leader Tomaro Bell. Next up, Chicano activist and educator Tony Diaz. And closing us out, Eastside conservative commentator Warren Fawcett. Okay, let's do this. 6 days ago, President Donald Trump stood beside Russian leader Vladimir Putin and told the world he does not believe America's intelligence agencies, that he instead accepts as true a foreign dictator's claim that Russia did not wage a campaign of cyber espionage aimed at influencing America's election. In a presidency inundated with controversial moments, rife with statements and scandals that would have devastated previous administrations, this commander-in-chief's deference to Putin is truly linchpin. Duplicitous, disloyal, even treasonous, all words widely used to describe Donald Trump's words in Helsinki.
Getting along with President Putin, getting along with Russia is a positive, not a negative. Right. Now, with that being said, if that doesn't work out, I'll be the worst enemy he's ever had.
In a 21st century nation with an attention span which seems to shrink with each passing moment, Democrats, Republicans, and folks who identify with neither continue to ask a once unthinkable question. What leverage, if any, is driving Trump's inexplicable embrace of Putin? I'm going to start with Nyanza Moore. What's your read?
I really don't understand how this is not a political thing anymore. This is now the man that's out front to represent our country, to have America's best interests at heart, is supposed to be championing for those people in the free world. If you get a dictator to our country or in Helsinki or wherever you go, and he's supposed to be coming here in the future, that did not have to answer to the annexation of Crimea or the assassination of an agent and his daughter on a park bench, then I'm not sure if we are in a position now in the United States where we really are looking at what it looks like to have somebody that has a puppet master pulling their strings because they have something on you. There's really no reason for our leader to say that both countries were at fault in the 2016 election. How was the United States at fault? Did we rig our own election? Are we in charge of our elections? Or did we have someone from a dictator from another country who was able to sit there? He's about a foot shorter than our president. But he was much taller on the day that they met in Helsinki. And I really feel like President Trump did not back down in what as far as saying, oh, well, America first, whatever. America's first, but Russia's more first than America when it comes to Donald Trump. And for the GOP not to call their own president to the carpet and say, whoa, what's going on here? It's just really embarrassing and humiliating. And the Russians were able to laugh the next day in their newspapers when they realized that their leader won over our leader. It was embarrassing.
Steve Toth, I'm really glad you're on the panel this week because I know you to be an American first, a Republican second. What is your read on all of this?
90% of the nukes in the entire world are controlled by these two countries, the United States and the former Soviet Union. 90%. Let that sink in a second. And for whatever reason, the Democrats want to take us to war with Russia. They want sharp, nasty, harsh rhetoric between the United States and the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union. Trump is trying to de-escalate that right now. Would I have picked different words to communicate that? Would I have picked different words in a way to communicate that to the press? I get the fact that at Helsinki, the press was after one thing, an embarrassing moment for Trump in front of the American people and in front of the Russian dictator to try and stir things up. Trump, on the other hand, is trying to de-escalate all the harshness and is trying to bring the two nations together to a point where we can talk. Would I have done it differently? You bet I would have. But let this sink in a second. We have got to find a way to communicate with Russia in a way that is void of this harsh rhetoric.
Okay, Tomaro Bell.
Please.
Please.
Please. He did not in any way give that same attitude to our friends in NATO. He talked to them like they were kindergarten kids, and he was the teacher. And then he went over there and on his boyfriend, Putin. Please. This man made us look weak.
Yes.
Way weaker than any of the NATO nations ever did. He made us look weak and submissive. And then you turn on your own country because, you know, they looking at me too. So if I say they lying about you, you make sure you come back and say they lying about me because I don't want anything to come after me. So he's aligning himself, just like he told the lady on 60 Minutes before he ever became president. I'm gonna say everything a lie, so then if they come out with something, then nobody will believe them. Baby, please. It was humiliating watching him. That's what it was.
Okay.
He's an embarrassment.
Jessica.
It is thick to listen to my fellow colleagues who are on the other side of the aisle talk about this right now, because they had 8 years to do something about this.
Right.
They had 8 years to do something about this in the Obama administration. They had 8 years to go after this relationship and try to fix it. Instead, they made it colder and they made it worse. And you know what? I've said before, and I'll say it again, I'm not going to question the approach that the president wants to take to foreign leaders around the world and the manner in which he decides to speak to them. We have seen it pan out and work in other cases, and so perhaps we'll see it pan out and work again in the long term here. This is just a blip on the screen. It's the crisis of the day that Democrats want to take it at. But the bottom line is for former officials in the Obama administration to come out and call the president treasonous. This is just a simply tabloid. It's the wrong thing for national security. They had 8 years to do something about it. They didn't do anything about it. We're actually starting to have a conversation, and we'll see where it goes. But the bottom line here, this is just one more.
But Russian meddling was 2016.
One more gimmick. Unfortunately, the Democrats are using it at the expense of the American people.
2016 is not Russian meddling.
I assume you're locked and loaded.
Well, I tell you what, this is why it's confusing.
This is what treason looks like.
This is why it's really confusing. Isn't Donald Trump supposed to be the law and order president? Isn't Donald Trump the one that said that blue lives matter? So all of a sudden, he doesn't trust the FBI. All of a sudden, the law and order president disputes what our courts have decided Russia did wrong and illegal. So our court systems have indicted Russians. I really wish that Trump would support American systems the way the Russians support their spies. Because you probably heard about Maria Butina. There's a whole movement called Free Maria Butina. So yeah, the Democrats got hacked. The Russians got to the, to the Republicans with a person. And she infiltrated the whole system. People remember that she was trying to spread guns in Russia. That makes no sense, of course. That's never going to happen. But the Russian Foreign Ministry went on Twitter, and they have fewer Twitter followers than Trump, okay? And they started a whole campaign to free Maria Butina. So you've got the Russians supporting their lady spy way more than Trump has supported our own FBI. That's disgraceful.
Okay, Warren, close us out. What's your read?
Well, until we know what was said in private, we really can't make an informed assessment of this. And I think the melodrama and the hyperbole from Trump's critics on this make it hard to take them seriously. Like, I've heard it compared to 9/11, Pearl Harbor, let's see, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Give me a break. It's nothing like that. I read the transcript twice. I don't think many people did. And there was one ill-advised phrase in there. He didn't sign anything. There's nothing to indicate that he surrendered. If you look at his actions, giving arms to the Ukraine, kicking a lot of Russians out, closing the consulate in Seattle, closing the properties in New York and San Francisco, I think his actions speak louder than his words.
Okay, we're going to leave it right there. Talk more about it in a second. When we return, How will the mess in Helsinki impact the midterms? Could GOP candidates pay a price for the president's apparent affection for Putin? Our panel dives in after the break. Welcome back. During a week when White House aides, hardcore Trump loyalists, and the president himself attempted to walk back the spectacle in Helsinki, frazzled GOP political strategists facing critical midterms endeavored to start mending the damage. They will have exactly 107 days to work with. Former White House senior advisor Steve Bannon says the November election is a, quote, referendum on Trump. In other words, you are either with him, warts and all, or voting with Democrats to impeach him. I'm going to go with the Republican strategist, Jessica Colon. I mean, is this the type of thing that could hurt candidates in November?
Well, first of all, I don't know how many. Do I look frazzled? Have you spoken to frazzled GOP strategists throughout the week? I think this.
Way to keep it together.
That this is just, look, we are headed into a midterm election. The economy is fantastic. Folks are really feeling the effect of the tax cuts in their pocketbooks. We're looking forward to having the debates. Fundraising is going really well across the board when you look at all the different funds that are leadership funds and the candidates' own fundraisings that are reports that are coming in. This is not a moment that we're going to worry about in the short term. It's going to have a long-term effect. We saw the markets were stable this week. It's just all the trend points are looking great, and we're looking forward to success in November. We will continue to take the Democrats head-to-head on leadership, on national security, on tax cuts, on state government that has let us out of Harvey, that has brought a better Texas, a better economy, made us the best state in the nation with which to do business. And that's why people are moving here in droves to take advantage of our economy.
Wait, Nyanza, look, I mean, made
nice
a
commercial.
Way to go,
yeah.
strategist.
Charlottesville, the tape, all the other stuff has gone by the wayside. Does that happen again with what happened in Finland? People just...
Craig, it hasn't gone by the wayside. We just haven't had the November elections yet. I mean, just because we're not talking about it right now or that we talked about it 2 months ago doesn't mean it's dead. It doesn't mean that people have forgotten all of the things that have gone on over the last year. The people that are going to be at the polls voting are not forgetful people. You know, sometimes what you do to them 2 years ago, they'll come on and re-elect you the next time, or they'll say, no, it's time for you to go home. So what I'm thinking is, if Jessica thinks that, with your strategy opinion, that everything is going so swimmingly well, then why did Newt Gingrich say, quote, this is the most serious mistake of his presidency. Trump needs to clarify his statements. Newt Gingrich probably has a little bit more intelligence when it comes to the Republican strategy than anyone on this panel. And what I have to say is this, if Newt Gingrich is worried that the president needs to clarify his statements, strategist, let me say something in my Democratic blue today, then we all need to be mindful that just because we're not talking about it in today's news, Greg has had a lot of news to cover this last year. And if it wasn't so much news, we wouldn't be sitting here. If people weren't still upset about what's going on, then we wouldn't have to be going to argue at the polls. And in November, you guys are going home.
Yeah. Steve Toth, take it from there.
Come on, Stevie.
Nyanza, if a blue dress didn't take Bill Clinton down, this little foible is not going to take Trump down.
Okay, it's a foible.
Hold on. Go ahead.
Just put this in context. Every time the Democrats say something like, oh, the Holocaust, a crystal knot, or it's like Pearl Harbor. Oh, yes, they did.
I didn't say anything.
Or Pearl Harbor, or 9/11. They compare this miscue to those seriously egregious things. At some point, it just becomes noise to the American voter. Come October, the Republicans are going to push new tax cuts for the middle class. That's going to be the message going into the November election. And you know what? The Democrats will oppose those middle class tax cuts. And that's what this is going to come down to.
Okay, we're going to switch gears real quick. On yet another front, we find that Finland isn't the only trouble brewing for Mr. Trump. Turns out his former fixer, attorney Michael Cohen, actually recorded phone calls with then-candidate Trump involving hush money payments to Playmate Karen McDougal. And yet another signal he'll be cooperating with the Mueller investigation. Cohen told none other than Reverend Al Sharpton he plans to do what, quote, is good for the country and good for his family.
I really sensed that he was very troubled. He felt that he was being, in many ways, cast wrongly. And I feel that he was saying that he had been abandoned by Mr. Trump.
Okay, Tomaro Bell. Is the president in trouble when his former consigliere is taping him and handing it over to Mueller?
I really did not want to talk about his flavor of the moment that Cohen happened to tape him talking about he paid her off. I really wanted to deal with the other hyperbole issues, but anybody knows a secret is kept only when one of us is dead, okay? So when you have somebody who you give that kind of leverage in your life, and then to them, it appears you have turned against them, what do you think they're gonna do with it? Self-preservation is the law. And that's what they're going to do, is preserve themselves. I want to go back to what he talked about. I do agree. When they hyperbole to say that this is Pearl Harbor or 9/11 or anything like that is ridiculous. It is what it is. It's bad enough. It's like saying, oh, the Santa Fe shooting is like the 60 civil rights. No. It's bad enough by itself. It doesn't need any comparison. We've never had a president go to a foreign country and say, you know what, I don't even trust them folk back there, okay? And we've never had that. We've never had that. So I agree, you don't need to hyperbole.
Okay, Warren Fawcett, do you think what Cohen has could hurt the president?
It's an empty soup bowl. President Trump waived the attorney-client privilege on this. The actions occurred 12 years ago, long before he was president, and it's been handed off to the U.S. attorneys in Western New York. Mueller's not even handling this, so I think it's just another rabbit hole.
Okay, Tony, close us out on this. I mean, the Cohen tapes, this is a guy who knows all the secrets. Whether there's anything there, this is the guy that's going to know it.
Well, I think Trump's fixer is going to fix it for himself to begin with. So he's simple, but not suicidal. He knew who he was dealing with. Supposedly, Trump leaned on him for dirty tricks. So, of course, he used the ultimate dirty trick, saying, hey, I got stuff on you if I ever go down. I'm not sure if Trump knows how to play tough guy at the end of the day. He don't know how to deal with Putin, and his own fixer's turning on him. This is another step towards the end of this game. And I'll tell you what, even the folks that are at this stage that are blinded, they have Trump deranged syndrome, where they believe in Trump no matter how deranged he gets. That's what I'm calling it now. They need to know one thing. Probably if, okay, he stacked the deck with the Supreme Court, so maybe that won't stick. This is all leading to the moment when Trump will have to resign, because he's just a billionaire playboy. He might not run again at the end of this. If he doesn't go to jail, why would he run? He just wanted to chase women.
Oh, my Lord.
Make millions. He thought he could do that better as president. He's going to quit. And finally, I think he really doesn't want to show his taxes. So this is one step towards that. This ain't going to topple him. We're in this for the long haul, probably 4 years. He'll have to resign on his own, I think.
Okay, we're leaving it right there. Certainly, we'll talk about it again. Coming up, the president ups the ante with China on trade, threatening tariffs on everything they ship to America. We'll discuss the ramifications, so stay with us. Welcome back. We must close our extensive discussion of the president with the issue of foreign trade and Mr. Trump's threat on Friday to slap tariffs on the full $500 billion worth of Chinese exports to our country each year. That would be around 15 times their current level of $34 billion. The president says China has been ripping us off for too long, and he intends to stop it. Critics say this weaponization of trade policy amounts to a cure that's far worse than the ailment.
Desperately hope that we get off of this tariff kick. It's really starting to bite around the country.
Okay, Steve Toth, are we playing chicken with the Chinese, and could it hurt us long run? I mean, lots of history says trade wars are bad.
About 10% of what we bring into our country is from the Chinese, but it's about 80% of what they ship to us. They are the ones that are going to be on the losing end of this at the end of the day. 1945, the Allies wanted to make sure we didn't make the same mistakes from World War I, and we gave these nations in Asia and Southeast Asia and Europe most favored trade status. That most favored trade status is what has been killing blue-collar jobs across the United States, and for years the Democrats have made a big deal about this, rightfully so, and this is where the Republican Party has really blown it. Finally, we have someone in the White House that understands that the game is up and that we've got to start showing deference and preference to the American worker.
There's lots of people who say automation is what's taking jobs, not the Chinese. Tony, you want to respond?
Sure, because guess what? I'm going to put Texas first, okay? So the Republicans, if the economy stays strong, they've got a better chance in November. The problem is these tariffs are going to hit farmers here in Texas, and I want to put Texas first because here's the other thing. Trump is doing the same math that Steve just described. The problem is that Trump praises these dictators. These dictators play by different rules. So one quick example is that the Chinese dictator doesn't have to go to Congress for anything. Trump, Trump can raise tariff a little bit. Here's the other thing too. Kim Jong-un in North Korea, he's starving his people to keep power. So at the end of the day, we're messing with a big nation that doesn't play by the same rules. Here's the other thing too. At the end of the day, people are going to feel it in the pocketbook. And I want to remind Trump of one thing. We are stronger and richer than these dictatorship countries because we are a democracy, and the people won't put up with it. They aren't going to go hungry for him, and they aren't going to lose money. So that's when he's going to cross the line.
Okay, we're going to talk about this issue again in the future, but we got to go to the break. When we return, a recent poll has him in striking distance of a stunning Lone Star upset. Is it real or just wishful progressive thinking? Mike Collier, Democrat for Lieutenant Governor, makes his case on our hot seat after the break. Welcome back. For those of you still getting to know the Democratic candidate for Texas Lieutenant Governor, I will tell you this. After a very successful career in corporate accounting, Mike Collier felt compelled to offer his policy and number crunching skills to fellow Texans. He is seeking to dislodge Republican Dan Patrick from a position many consider the most powerful in state government. It will not be easy. With that said, Mike Collier, welcome back to the hot seat, man.
Thank you, Greg. Glad to be here.
Hey, look, in the wake of Santa Fe, you know, a lot of people are asking the question, what would Mike Collier do to make Texas schools safer? We've had some proposals from Governor Abbott and Patrick. Have they gone far enough?
I don't think we've done anything. We've talked, but I don't think we've done anything. I think we need to do two things fundamentally. First of all, there needs to be more people, more counselors, trained psychologists in the schools to develop relationships with students so that we do a better job of protecting one another. I don't think we militarize schools. I don't think we arm schools. I think we need more trained counselors, and that takes money. And we need to appropriate more money. And there's no avoiding that. And then second, Texans are ready to talk about sensible gun laws. And I talked to Mothers Demand Action. They're very onto this. Two things, very simple, background checks that work and red flag laws, which even Governor Abbott recommended. However, we haven't acted. And the reason why we haven't acted is because there's no consensus. And the reason why there's no consensus is because Dan Patrick is stalling this, which is the wrong answer.
Mike, the state comptroller says lawmakers will have an additional $2.8 billion at their disposal. How should that money be used to reap the largest benefit for Texans?
Well, first of all, there's no surprise that we have that surplus of $2.5 billion. If you look at rig count, you know, I've been advocating quarterly revenue forecasts so that we don't have surprises of this nature. If you look at rig count, it was growing dramatically during the session, so there's no surprise. The biggest issue is we're stepping into the largest day one deficit I think that the state has ever faced, calculated by some at $7.9 billion. So we have to be pretty cautious about what we do with that money. I will say this, there are an awful lot of retired teachers who are unhappy to see that number because they took a huge cut in their benefits because we didn't have the money. It turns out we did have the money. And then property taxes are up. Legislature raised property taxes 14%. Perhaps it didn't have to be raised so much if they knew that $2.5 billion was coming.
Mike, the Republican leadership in Austin has caught plenty of heat because they've been reluctant to release money directly from the rainy day fund for Harvey relief and flood mitigation. Is that criticism justified, or can they get that money, you know, to affected areas later?
Oh, I think that criticism is justified. I think there's no question. I mean, we built up over $10 billion in that fund. We never use it for its intended purpose, which is to buffer ups and downs in the oil business. We have said as a matter of policy it's only for rainy days, right? Well, we had a rainy day, Greg, and there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done to restore our state. There was a time when Texas leaders reacted to things like this, and they aren't reacting to things like this. That's one of the reasons why I'm running. We need leadership again. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of recovery. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of preparing for the next storm. We haven't had a Category 5 hit the ship channel ever And if that happens without storm surge protection, we're in deep trouble. So we need to use that money.
Mike Collier, Republicans led by Dan Patrick have appropriated $900 million this biennium for border security, and that is a federal responsibility. Is that money well spent? And if you don't think it's well spent, where should it be spent?
I'll say first, we should secure the border. We absolutely should secure the border, but we should do it smart and not stupid. Your question, has that money gone? I've been critical of that money from the very beginning, not because I don't think it should be spent, but we weren't told what it was being spent on. We didn't have performance metrics to see if it would work. There's great mystery associated with that money. And now we discover, and Dan Patrick is saying this, that the border is not secure, suggests the suspicion that it was wasted. The biggest issue, in my opinion, is that I don't want to waste money. I want to be effective with money, and I want transparency. And there was no transparency or accountability with regard to that money spent on the border.
Mike, a recent poll published by Breitbart had you just 2 points behind the lieutenant governor in a red state. Do you really believe you're within striking distance? And what's it gonna take to make this to get you to the finish line?
I think, Greg, there's no question I'm within striking distance, and I'll tell you why. Dan Patrick has made himself very well known as a lieutenant governor who does not solve problems. And where do you start? Property taxes. Property taxes are up. School property taxes are up 26.8% on his watch as lieutenant governor, written into his budget. So he hasn't solved that problem. School funding is declining. He hasn't solved that problem. Storm recovery, storm readiness, he hasn't solved that problem. Water, he hasn't solved. Healthcare costs are going up 7.5% a year. He hasn't solved that problem. He has made himself famous as the guy who obsesses with bathrooms, but he has also made himself famous as the guy who will not solve problems honestly. And Texans they get it, and when they decide who do they want, they like what they see in me.
Mike Collier, hope you'll come back to the hot seat.
Thank you very much
for joining us this morning. Up next, the latest Texas execution has some alleging racial bias among those who decide who lives and who dies. So stay with us. Welcome back. Tucked quietly in this week's news rundowns between the Helsinki summit and the All-Star game was word of the latest execution here in Texas. 14 years ago, at the age of 21, Chris Young murdered a San Antonio store owner during a robbery. While in prison, Young repented, eased racial tension on death row, reportedly saved a guard from assault, and prevented a suicide. The murder victim's son, Mitesh Patel, requested mercy for his father's killer. Those arguments failed to persuade the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles to grant clemency. The same clemency recently granted Thomas Whitaker, a suburban privileged Caucasian who as a college student orchestrated the murder of his mother and brother for money. Attorneys for Young contend the different outcomes illustrate a racial bias which allowed Whitaker to live and Young to die. Panel, this is a tough topic. What's your point? I'm going to start with Warren.
Okay. I think what we have here is a green apples and red apples comparison. Whitaker's father asked for the clemency, and Whitaker's father was a victim. In the other case, it was the son of a victim. Plus, in Young's case, he actually did the shooting. But that said, I don't think either of them should have been allowed to live because, you know, the sentence should be final. And I think the parole board should give an explanation for the rationale behind their decisions.
Tomaro?
I agree with what Mr. Fawcett said on that because as a person who had a family member killed by gun violence, I am not opposed to the death penalty. But I do believe that the clemency that they granted one person and then didn't grant the other does leave questioning of how they came to that decision. I understand that his dad didn't want to have no family, but your son was the orchestrator of the murder. He went out and got the person who killed his mama and his brother. The guy didn't know them and wouldn't have done it. So he was as guilty as the person who walked in the store and robbed.
I believe that racial bias may be inherent to where people don't even realize they're being biased. So let's take California when we had the rape with the college students was doing all that. The judge said, okay, you know, you're going to go back to college, you'll be fine. Let's just do probation. As a matter of fact, time served. And then when the black guy does the same thing, it's like, okay, you're going to prison for 20 years. So in this situation, you know, usually the orchestrator of the murders is the one that's more, you know, accountable than the shooter. Because but for the orchestrator, the shooter would never have done it. In this case, I believe that you know, setting up a double homicide of your own family members warrants the death penalty. Yes. And, you know, repenting is one thing. If your family decides that you should stay alive, it's another thing. But racial bias or whatever, if it was socioeconomic bias, poor versus wealthy, black versus white, it's any bias at all does not belong in a clemency hearing in a death penalty case, because those decisions are literally final unless you're Jesus.
Okay, we got to leave it there. Still ahead. In the wake of Parkland, Texas schools crack down on even the slightest threat. Plus, the indictment of former Houston Press Secretary Darian Ward. Stick around. There's a lot more of Watch Your Point just ahead. Welcome back. Former City of Houston Press Secretary Darian Ward was criminally indicted this week on a charge of withholding public information. The investigation revealed Ward failed to hand over more than 5,000 emails from her government account, the majority of which involved her private TV production company. While some called the indictment an overdue message to public officials who hide information, Ward's attorney Chris Tritico says his client violated no law.
All of these emails that they're talking about, Joy in Motion Productions, that was her private business, and all of those are exempt from disclosure under the Texas Public Information Act, and her failure to disclose them is not a crime.
As Darian Ward prepares her defense, she may have some company. The city's chief development officer, Andy Icken, is drawing serious scrutiny for conducting city business with controversial state representative Jim Murphy using a personal email account. I'm going to Tomaro Bell.
Thank you, Greg, for going to Tomaro Bell. First, let me start with Darian. Now, I am not her attorney, and I'm not in the opposition of attorney, but I know for a fact, when you have government and company property, you do anything on there, it's no longer private. That's why you cannot surf porn on your computer at your job on your personal email. You cannot, because that's not your computer, that's not your desk. You're supposed to be doing government work while you're there. So her charge is without providing public information. She withheld that information. That's the charge. I believe that's the one they went with first, because I believe they're going to come back with the second one. And Andy Icken, Lord have mercy. Okay, so now on Monday, it was discovered that he had been doing business with, oh, that's so nice the way you described Jim Murphy. I know worse descriptions from my West Side super neighborhood people when it comes to him. He has done worse than her, because if you read his emails, he is usurping the authority of fellow directors at the city, and in his position as economic development director, and he got a new title he made up, international business something, so he can be over there in South America right now. But anyway, those things that he's doing, usurping the city, he's going far beyond but the emails. His is the fact that he has been derelict in his duties, it appears, by doing what he's doing, telling them, you don't have to worry about the director of public works. You don't have to worry about the director of waste management. I got you. That is how that community, which was devastated by Harvey, was so perplexed as to how Metro National and that developer could get approved 500 houses on that golf course where it flooded. And now we know.
Okay. Equal opportunity grief to both progressive and conservative.
Right.
What's your point? Want to talk about this, Jessica?
Yeah, you know, when this first came up, it was a matter of if you are the press secretary for the mayor of the 4th largest city in the country, rivaling to be the 3rd, it is a full-time job, and you should not be doing other work on taxpayer time. You know, some people do things in the evening. You know, there are other times a day. If you want to do something else on your own time, that's your own time. When you are paid for by the taxpayers, your salary is you know, taxpayer money. You are there to work for the taxpayers to whom you serve. And if you're going to get this on a technicality, the overall issue of the ethics of it is where the failure certainly is.
Okay, wanted to mention that Friday special city council meeting that wasn't. That's when, after an effort to put pay parity for firefighters on the November ballot, fell short because there was no quorum. Some called the effort disrespectful of the mayor, who was out of town on city business. That said, the petitions for a vote have been verified, so there seems to be no justifiable reason for Turner and his allies to keep it off the ballot. I'm going to Tomaro Bell again.
For going to Tomaro Bell again.
Thank you, Greg, for going to Tomaro Bell.
So at this meeting that was supposed to be on Friday, After they had all signed to have this meeting and they had agreed to come, I know that they got calls from the mayor as to why are you all doing this, because Dave Martin, who is the head of the finance committee, was supposed to let them know that this is going to be spoken about Thursday when he returns. Now, I agree that the process of getting ballots to get your petition on there, I believe that is a fair process and they deserve their due process. I mean it. I totally agree that this needs to be addressed. Now, the question is the word parity in pay. Because parity in pay, if you look at what they're saying and what they're requesting, is based on a title. That's not how you get parity in pay. Parity pay is based on the performance of duties. So if the job descriptions are the same, the pay should be the same. A captain of an HFD department is equal to a lieutenant in HPD, because a captain at HPD is over the whole city when he's on duty. An HFD captain is over whatever station or region that he is in. It's limited. But I damn sure believe that after a year, we should be further down than we are with this.
Are they dragging their feet purposely?
I cannot give a rational reason as to why this has been delayed. I'm not kidding. I mean, the pension is done. I don't know what the delay or why it's been delayed. Okay, they said Harvey, and I'll give them that. Harvey was a reason why, you know, they didn't have time to do it, but I believe that it should have been done by now, and I do believe that they need to have their day, but I know the voters definitely need to understand that's what women fought for, equal pay for equal work. You can't say, oh, because I'm a manager, I should get the same as you. Well, you manage McDonald's. I manage Vic and Anthony's. Well, you don't get the same I get, okay?
Gotta leave it there. Switching gears, fresh research indicates that during the 5 months after the campus shooting in Parkland, Florida, there's been an explosive increase in student arrests here in our state. Texas Appleseed and Disability Rights Texas report a 600% rise in criminal charges lodged against kids for making a terroristic threat or exhibiting or threatening to exhibit a firearm. The largest percentage of the increase is for students aged 10 through 13. Critics of the zero tolerance policy say it is ruining young lives without making schools any safer. Okay, I thought we had some sound there, but I'm going to go to Steve Toth on this.
You know, this was one of the issues that came up in the 83rd legislative session, which was the fact that do you continue to allow school districts to withhold information from the police when there's been a serious threat and when someone is showing serious issues that could result in violence. And here we have now a situation where we've got a kid that did some awful things, killed a bunch of people. It's just an egregious deal, whether it's Parkland or whether it's here. And now all of a sudden, people are starting to say, oh, but we've got to be careful with these kids. I'm for zero tolerance on this. I really am. If you've got a kid that's showing dangerous signs, then the police have to look at it. Okay,
we've all heard the stories about disabled kids with autism, and I know you have a heart for them. So,
yeah,
you know,
and that's not what we're talking
who
about here, Greg.
outburst here and end up taken out of their schools.
And when I say zero tolerance, I'm not talking about a kid that obviously has some issues, and the school district knows that they have issues. This is called wisdom, and they've got to show some wisdom when they exercise this.
But they have not shown wisdom in the past, and I agree with what Greg is saying. When you have children, okay, come on, y'all. You've been 12 and 13, and somebody make you mad. Oh, I'm gonna try to kill them. You don't really mean you're gonna try to kill them. If it can be done justifiably and done fairly, then I agree, because I don't think that they should have had. This boy had all kind of problems. They had all kind of clues that something was wrong. It wasn't addressed. I don't believe that should be withheld. But when you say zero tolerance, you need to make sure that you mean what you say.
Okay, real quickly to Warren, and then Tony, who's an educator right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is a case of whenever there is an incident, it should be investigated. But I think that zero tolerance has kind of morphed into zero common sense.
Okay, yes. Tony, real quick.
Not wisdom, it takes a lot of training. And right now, we just described what a teacher should have to be taught on how to evaluate a serious threat or not. a young kid playing with guns and talking about it? Are they just being a kid, or are they actually making a threat? On top of it, too, people need to understand we need to put more money and investment in this. We're about to fire 100 teachers in Houston Independent School District. They're going to fire another 100 teachers in Austin Independent School District. We're actually losing expertise instead of gaining it.
Okay, we're actually leading the state in Harris County in these prosecutions, and they are felony prosecutions.
But the issue is zero tolerance needs to be taken out of the discussion. The phrase zero tolerance, it's case-by-case basis for each child. Each child is different.
Yes.
Each child has different needs, and some children are special needs. So let's just say needs-based. Let's do it based on case-by-case. Get the zero tolerance out of the conversation.
Leaving it there. Still ahead, our panel answers the question, what did we miss? So stay with us. Welcome back. So much happening, so little time to absorb it. That's why each week we turn to our team to help fill in the gaps with the question, what did we miss? Jessica Colon.
I'm going straight promotion for a Victory 2018 event. The Greater Houston Council of Federated Republican Women PAC is hosting Diamond and Silk on August 11th down at Kim Son. We're really excited to have them, so if you want more information on the event, Greater Houston Council of Federated Republican Women PAC.org.
Nyanza. Okay, so shameless plug. Thank you, Facial Nails, for my nails. But did you all remember that Carter Page flew under our radar this week? But he, you know, they do believe that he was recruited by the Russians. And I don't know if you remember that story, but that's one of those things that's going to come back this election.
It bombed. Nothing there.
Big shout out and thank you to Sheriff Rand Henderson, Montgomery County, and the Texas Rangers. They're putting the finishing touches on a school response plan to active shooters that is going to be the premier plan in the state of Texas.
Okay, tomorrow.
All right, personal privilege. Captain Benny's, Alvin Moore, thank you for the deja vu. For the family of Dr. Mark Hosnek, you are in my prayers. There was Granny's cardiologist. He was a phenomenal doctor, and it is not just a loss for the medical center. It is a loss for Houston.
Tony.
It is time to put Houston Latino art on the map. We're going to be demanding more funding for our Latino arts group starting this week.
Okay, Warren.
Kimberly Guilfoyle's left Fox News after 12 years to go work with her boyfriend, Donald Trump, on Republican campaigns. She used to be married to a Democrat, Gavin Newsom, in California. So you might say, depending on how you look at it, she either left the dark side or went to the dark side.
All right, we'll leave it there. That's all the time we have. Thanks to our team. And remember, keep it right here. Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace is coming up at the top of the hour. And please be sure and join us next week for the latest edition of What's Your Point? Have a great week.